Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 82 here at the Tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. Well, as I am typically prone to do in between doing these videos and watching Power Rangers and watching Super Sentai, I end up watching a lot of Star Trek, specifically Deep Space Nine. And one of the things I really liked about Deep Space Nine, what was towards the latter part of the series when they did the Dominion War arc, which, for those of you not aware, it was basically a 2-season-long war between the Federation Alliance and the Dominion. And what's really captivating about that as a whole, it really just kind of any intergalactic war that you'll have. You can talk about the Galactic Civil War and the Rebellion and things like that. But what Star Trek was great about doing is you had multiple different races with different ideology, culture, history, tradition, political influence, just all these different things that kind of meshed up together. And because those were all in conflict, that's why we got the war with the Dominion, because the Dominion ideological philosophy was completely against what was going on with the Alpha Quadrant races, completely against what the Federation wanted, the Klingons, the Romulans, and so forth and so forth. So, as I am prone to do, because I was watching Deep Space Nine, I was looking at all this intrigue and war and stuff, I started to relate this to Power Rangers. And I kind of realized when we break down Power Rangers, even though Power Rangers has been into space many times, has had visitors from other worlds coming to Earth, we don't really explore alien races on the whole within the series. Typically, we'll go ahead and focus on maybe one or two characters of alien races, but we never explore a race and its culture and its history much in the same way that Star Trek does. Now, don't misunderstand. I'm not going to go ahead and compare Power Rangers to Star Trek in saying that one's better, inferior, or anything like that. I just want to make a point of comparison here in the sense that we have a series that's completely based in space, that means Star Trek, where you have to flesh out those alien characters and cultures. But Power Rangers, which, again, through most of its history is Earth-centric, doesn't really take the time to flesh out the alien cultures as much as it should. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I want to, first of all, give you guys an understanding of what alien cultures I'm referring to, what I think of as an alien culture within the Power Rangers universe, and kind of where I find the fault with it, as well as the good things I like about it. But I just kind of want to talk in general about aliens and Power Rangers because it seems to be it should be a very important topic to discussing Power Rangers, because let's start from Mighty Morphin Day 1 right here. What were the villains always described as, at least in the toy line and the commercials? Evil space aliens. Okay, but the thing about it is that a lot of these, quote, evil space aliens were not part of any species or race. As we know, Finster created many of them from clay in his workshop, and then others were just monsters that, to me, seem more like genetic anomalies. Because when you identify them as alien, yes, you are saying that they are not of this planet, but you're not classifying them as any type of alien species, which is where we draw the difference. Because think of the goofish for an example right here. Now, yes, he is a created creature, but there is no planet out there in which you have an entire race of goofish, male, female, procreating, and so forth. Or take the pudgy pig. Yes, he's made from clay. Is he from Finster's imagination, or are we to believe that since he's an evil space alien, there could be a race of giant pig monsters that eat whole supplies of food? Unlikely from an evolutionary standpoint, given how long it takes the pudgy pig to actually eat all the food from what Zordon said in the episode Food Fight. So a lot of the monsters that we run into, evolutionary-wise, could not work as actual aliens of species and races. That a lot of these aliens that we're seeing are going by, again, the context of different from us, because, technically my wife is an alien because she's from Korea. She's not from America, so she's alien to this country, if you want to get into a very simplistic definition. But of course, when we think alien, we think from outer space and so forth. But again, none of these monsters are from any type of species that can go ahead and tell. Now, we do have many different species listed for Power Rangers, and I'm going to go ahead and give you guys kind of a quick rundown of a small list I've compiled. Now, this is an incomplete list, one, because, again, I just did in about 5 minutes, a little bit of wiki searching there and Google searching, and what I consider, just kind of a short list of species within the Power Rangers universe. And, of course, those are Quishans, Triforians, Zybrians, Syrians, Mercurians, Eltarians, Karovian humans, Marinoians, Horaths, which is a Trider from Zeo, that's his species. Tengas, I believe, are a species, and I'll kind of get into that. And, did I say Marinoians? Maya's people. So it's a very short kind of list when you think about it. About 20 years of Power Rangers history, we haven't ran into many different alien species. Now, I have to question why that is first. Let's explore that question. Why is it that we are not running into a lot of alien species in Power Rangers? Well, you can argue that it's not supposed to take place in space. Okay. But you do have Lost Galaxy Power Rangers in space. I mean, that's a given. And SPD, which is the entire premise, is about aliens coming to live on Earth. Which, by the way, I will point out that the difficulty with me believing SPD's premise is that the aliens that come to Earth, they're always different each episode. There's never any type of reoccurring alien, with the exception of Piggy, whatever his species, or if he's a one-off. We're not exactly sure. There's never like in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, back to that example, you always see a Bajoran on Deep Space Nine someplace. You always see Cardassians running around, always see Klingons running around, because, well, there's more of them, obviously. In Power Rangers SPD, I didn't get the sense that there were any full races living on Earth. It was just like 500 different types of aliens within one city, basically. But when you look at it, all the threats that the Power Rangers are facing from space, basically, are not a single unified race. They are not the Cardassians. They are not the Klingons. You got the Trubian Empire, which is not made up of a single race. Which, yes, you can say they're more like the Dominion, that they're made up of many races, but I would argue that the Trubian Empire is really just Grum and whoever he hires to help him. Because we never actually see any soldiers beyond, again, Monster of the Week and the Crybots and so forth. So, back to the alien races points, like, why don't we see them? I mean, I would say before we got to Power Rangers in space, it was, okay not to go ahead and see them, because you're seeing a lot of rogue characters. Okay, Rita, for example, she is a rogue agent in the fact that she wants conquest and domination. Now, this is before the United Alliance of Evil was ever introduced as a concept, so her attacking on her own, okay, I can go ahead and get that. That makes a bit of sense. And she employs clay monsters. Okay. Second season, we have the same thing with Zed. There's a hierarchy, but there's no empire. There's no monolithic system of, this is an alien species. And again, all of the minions seem to be from different species or different single monsters. In the third season, we did get the Tengu, which were introduced by Rio Revolto. Also point out that Rito is obviously not the same species as Rita, because Rita is human-like in appearance, but as far as we know, she is not human. And I'll get into kind of that point when we get to Power Rangers in Space and KO35 and the Krovians. So we get the Tengu, which come from eggs, which indicates to me that they are breeding, because you have to breed to go ahead and form eggs. So I think this is the first time we get a full, true identifiable race within Power Rangers, and it's only a few episodes before Aquitar and all that. Well, not even a few, but like a season before, half a season before we get to Aquitar. And of course, then we get to the Equations, and we only see 5 of them. We see Cestria later, but that's about it. We see 5. And people will say the Great Beluga Escape was the first time Power Rangers saw the galaxy outside of their home planet, outside of Earth, outside of Rhea's invasion. I will go ahead and agree with that because we have an alien visitor come in. But when you get to Aquitar, that's the first time we're interacting with a species, more than one individual. We have the Alien Rangers, and they come to render assistance to the Power Rangers. And of course, we get in Zeo, we are introduced to the race of the Triforians. We have the Varex Bounty Hunters, which they seem to be a race unto their own. I'm not quite sure because we see only a couple of them, and I don't know if they're all the same dog gold thing. Basically, whatever he's supposed to go ahead, what they are supposed to go ahead and be. So we get those guys, and Power Rangers Space kind of did like a better job of that, I would go ahead and say. Turbo, we get, again, another rogue villain in Divatox in several different monsters, but not real aliens. Oh, and back to Z, you got the Machine Empire, and I guess you could call them a race, but that would depend on how you would look at artificial life forms. Again, I'm going to use Star Trek as an example here, but Data is a race of one, basically, or as Picard described, a culture of one. Is the Machine Empire a species or not? That's a good ethical debate to go ahead and have. For the purposes of this, I'm just going to kind of like pass on talking about the Machine Empire because that could lead to any number of issues to which I don't want to go ahead and discuss today. And of course, then we get the Power Rangers in Space, which, oddly enough, they don't really encounter a lot of different alien races. They encounter the Korovians, which are human, and we're introduced to the concept that humans exist somewhere outside of Earth. And I just want to point this out because Linkara makes a good point that evolutionary-wise speaking, it's very unusual to think of the idea of humans evolving parallel on other planets throughout the galaxy. This actually kind of opens up a can of worms for the concept of humans within the Power Ranger universe, meaning either A, they all originated for Earth and there were some offshoots that left the planet at some point through various reasons, or 2, humans are not indigenous to Earth, that they are from another planet, and we are an offshoot of some other human civilization or culture. Or 3, and this is just off the top of my head, or 3, that we are an artificially created race, much like the Jem'Hadar, again in Star Trek, that a species who has no indigenous homeworld but may have been created for a particular purpose. Using their science fiction, Transformers. Yes, they have a homeworld, but they were an artificially created race. None of that, which of course has anything to do too much with what I'm talking about, but I just think it's an interesting point that humans exist other places in the galaxy, and there could be this great mystery of why that is, basically. So again, for the first 6 years of Power Rangers, we're kind of limited with the interactions for aliens. And again, let's go back to the Equations. When we're introduced to them, what do we know about them? Okay, the entirety through the series, we know that they live on a world that's mostly water, that they are amphibious, that they need purified water to go ahead and survive, so they're basically your average goldfish, and they have telepathic abilities. They may have transporting abilities, but I think that's more technology. I don't think that's a function of their biology. But we have an alien race, and that's all we know about them. We don't know anything about their culture. We don't know anything about their history. And when they go to war with the Hydro Commanders, we don't know why they're fighting exactly. I mean, we know Rita is attacking Earth, well, just kind of because. But usually when you go to war, and when I mean war as in 2 countries, 2 nations, 2 governments fighting against each other, again, it's usually ideological differences, territorial issues, religion, which I guess goes under ideological differences, and they're fighting for something. Now, never once do we find out about the Aquitians' war with the Hydra Commanders, why they're at war exactly. Why are they at war? What's going on? What is it about the Aquitian culture that makes it so offensive to the Hydra Commanders, or vice versa? I mean, heck, for all we know, the Aquitians could be the root of a galactic empire that just wants to conquer the universe. Well, we don't know that because, well, we're not introduced to any elements about who they are or their culture. And then look at the Triforians. What do we know about them? We know that they are human-like in appearance, that they can split into 3 forms, but are typically unified, and sometimes they'll venture out of their planet to go help out the galaxy. What is their culture? What is their history? What are their traditions? What is their religion? What do they believe? We don't learn anything about that from the Triforians in Zeo or anything since. I think what we end up having in Power Rangers, to its detriment, is that we're introduced to alien species, but we don't learn anything about them. We don't know, again, all the things that I went ahead and mentioned. We don't flesh them out. We turn them into one-dimensional, okay, we got these characters who are from a water world, we'll call them Aquitians. That's it. They don't think of anything else to develop these characters for. And granted, you may be doing that in a lot of science fiction, but a lot of science fiction will add to the culture and the characters. Okay, like for example, and again, I'm going to go back to Star Trek, because again, I've been on the Star Trek kick, and that's where I'm getting my ideas from here. You know, there's a line that says, "You green-blood son of a bitch," that Bones says to Spock. Well, that's just something that's kind of in line to make him seem alien. Oh, he's got green blood and all that kind of stuff. But then, we have to flesh that out. Why does he have green blood? It's copper-based. That's why his blood is green. We learn something about him through a line of dialogue, but then it's later expanded upon that Vulcans have copper blood. Okay. And then, you know, there's a whole episode dedicated to learn about Spock's people as far as the Pon farr and the history and the tradition and the ritual that goes into taking a mate. When we had Trip on Time Force, what do we know about the Zybrians? We know that they have crystals on their forehead and they can use it for telepathic communication and precognition. But do all Zybrians have green hair? Or is that just Trip? We never learn about his species, his planet. We don't learn about their abilities. If he's the only one, I mean, is Trip a last son of Krypton like Scion is in Time Ranger? We don't know that because they don't bother explaining it. And even when we get Kruger in SPD, we know he's the last of his kind. But what do we know about his people? We know that they were attacked by the Trubians and all killed. But what it was about, tell me something about their culture. What does Kruger believe? What's his religious point of view? Well, they never gave him one. They never expanded upon his character. And I think to learn about his race and his culture will inform something about him. You know, imagine you have a movie coming out, and you have all these characters, and most of them are, say, American. Well, if you throw a Brazilian into that mix, well, you don't have to explain much about his character because he's Brazilian. We know things about Brazil. We know about the Brazilian culture. We know the language that they speak. And most of us who keep up on world events will know about, you know, what they're doing in, you know, the global market, what they're doing with their military and their politicians and things like that. The fact that you make him Brazilian informs to the audience where he is coming from and what type of point of view he's going to have. So when you go ahead and have a Mercurian in Power Rangers Operation Overdrive, the fact that he's a Mercurian should inform us about him. Now, yes, we are told that in the case of the Mercurians that they like to help other people. Well, that's not much to go on. Why do they want to help other people? Were they subjugated as an alien race? Did they do subjugating? Is it their religious beliefs, or is it political belief? Are they pacifists, or what are they? We don't know about that. If we had a new Power Ranger season, we have an Equation in there. Okay, so what does having an Equation say about that character? What does he bring to the table that another human would accomplish? Well, since we haven't well defined the Equations, I don't know. I wouldn't be able to go ahead and tell you guys, because I think this is the ultimate point I'm trying to go ahead and get to here. Power Rangers did not begin as a space opera, did not begin as a space epic, but we did have an invasion from the stars, as in most science fiction, and at that time it wasn't necessary to have alien races and flesh them out. 20 plus years later, however, it has become necessary. The point of the matter, I think the reason that a lot of people are saying that the next movie is going to be a reboot is we have integrated so much of, we have all this mythos, we have this history of the Power Rangers universe, but a lot of it is not well defined, is the problem. We introduce things, but we never go anywhere with them. And I think it's almost to the nature of the program that we're not supposed to be dwelling on the aliens, but the action and the battles are going on, which I think is a big disservice, because the Power Rangers have grown beyond the point to where you can do that. Let me put it that way. They've grown so large in their history and then their complexity that you need to introduce more about these aliens. You have to introduce more about their culture and history and everything that makes a race unique. So what I'm hoping to go ahead and see eventually in Power Rangers is that we can explore these cultures. I mean, heck, the one thing I would like to explore the most would probably be the Eltarians, because one, are the Eltarians human? Probably. Most likely not. If they are human, are they related to humans on Earth or to the Krovian humans? Well, we don't know. And if they're Eltarians, what makes them genetically distinct from humans exactly? And what is about that race that informs us about Zordon? Because the thing is, Zordon, we know, is an alien this entire time. He never pretends to be a human. We know he's from Eltar, and thus he's Eltarian. So what is it about the Eltarians that informs Zordon? And I'm not trying to say that race is everything here, but it's a significant chunk. Just like, you watch Star Trek, you see a Ferengi. Oh, he's greedy. He's going to be motivated by profit. Not all the time, but 9 times out of 10, because that's how the race has been developed. And actually, that's a very good point right there. The Ferengi were such a joke in Next Generation, they brought them back in Deep Space Nine to flesh them out and make them deeper, more interesting characters. And that's great. That's exactly what you should be doing. So why haven't we seen Equations, or Zybrians, or Morcerians, or Mercurians? Why haven't we seen all these characters and aliens? Why is it that every season is a bunch of humans? Granted, it does take place on Earth, but Power Rangers has become such a larger place. The universe has become bigger since Day of the Dumpster. And I don't think we should be limited to humans. Maybe one day we'll have an all-alien team that's not, quote, human. I mean, it's kind of like, what I imagine is going to happen when they have a, quote, alien team is they'll have what they did Gokaiger. They all look human, but they're aliens. Now I want to see, let's make the next Red Ranger a Klingon. That's basically what I want to go ahead and see, something like that. But if not that, just the idea that we can have an alien race. So Dino Charge will have a bounty hunter. So that indicates to me that he is a single individual. Now, if he is definitely going to be Lord Chaos's design, does that mean there's an entire alien race that looks like him, or is he simply a monster? Because that's another issue with Power Rangers, is where do you draw the line between monster and alien? Because again, not every monster is created in a clay pot or made from Zed's staff. Divatox had a nasty habit of bringing monsters from different parts of the galaxy. Look at Goldgoyle. Is there an entire race of giant monsters like him? Or is he an anomaly? And if he is an anomaly and all these other creatures are anomalies, what does that say about the evolution and the diversity of life within the Power Rangers galaxy or Power Rangers universe? Because I do find it odd that, let's take Darkana, who's obviously an organic being. Is Darkanda the only one of his kind, or is there an entire race of mutated centipede creatures like him in the universe? And evolutionary-wise, again, like I said, creatures like the Pudgy Pig could not exist. So the Pudgy Pig cannot be a race onto his own given his appetite. The Goofish, going back to my very first example, could be the example of an entire race. Whatever Goldar is could be an entire race. Squat, Babu. There's no reason they couldn't be. So I'm going to go ahead and make last call here because I do feel like I'm rambling, but I'd like to think I've made a number of fine points here as far as I think what the Power Rangers universe has done and what it needs to be doing. Because again, I know a lot of the seasons since Lost Galaxy have been based on Earth, and you want to make your focus on certain things, like the Mystic Force was focused between, the Morlocks and, or I think they're called Morlocks, the villains of Mystic Force and the Power Rangers. So there's very little wiggle room for aliens and interactions and things like that. But again, we're living in a much larger universe where if you contain things only to what's happening on Earth with humans, you're doing a real disservice to the variety and the diversity that you've created within Power Rangers. So that's basically all I'm going to go ahead and say on the subject for tonight. I think I went a little too long on that. And like Homer said, it took me a long time to talk about nothing, which should be the tagline of the Onyx Tavern, I think. But what do you guys seriously think about all this? Do you think that we should be fleshing out more of these alien characters? Should we be defining the races? And should there be more of a distinction between what is a, quote, monster and what is part of an entire species within the Power Rangers universe? I'm very curious to hear your all's thoughts on the matter, so definitely leave them in the comment section below. Otherwise, I do want to thank you guys for listening tonight. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.